Hello, welcome to Expanding Horizons. I'm your host, LB, along with my cohort, CT. For those who aren't aware of how this show works, the basic idea is that we've both seen a lot of anime over the years, but it's not possible for us to have watched everything, which is why once a month we get together and recommend a show from anime history. And I'm totally echoing right now, aren't I?
Totally what?
Am I echoing right now really badly?
It's not echoing, it's just it feels like you're coming down the hall. I'm not hearing an after effect from it.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to check. So yeah, anyways. So we go back and we fill in a gap from our anime mental database by recommending a show from anime history that the other person has not seen yet for whatever reason. This month we're going to be tackling the fall 2018 sports series Run with the Wind and the spring 2015 tearjerker Plastic Memories. So before we start, just a couple of quick notes before we dive into the discussion. First, please forgive any horrible sound quality of these early episodes. I unfortunately have not been able to pick up a solid USB mic to plug into my laptop. So I'm hoping to be able to get one in the very near future, but in the meantime, my equipment is a little lacking, so apologies for that. Second, I just also wanted to remind everyone that if you want to support this venture and help it grow and develop, please feel free to toss a couple of dollars into my Ko-fi account where this podcast is being posted. It's only through your generosity and support that we can keep doing stuff like this. And the last thing I want to remind everyone of is that this is a spoiler zone. Reminder that this podcast is going to be diving into series quite deeply, as much as we can within our allotted time at least. So we will be doing this with reckless abandon, and spoilers are going to slip out at some point. You have been warned. So, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and let's dive right into things. Last month we started with CT series, so this month we're going to start with mine, which was Run with the Wind. Just scroll down really quickly. So, quick introduction to this series. Basically, what the story behind this series is there's a college student who is seen running through his neighborhood after stealing something from a convenience store, and another young man sees him and immediately recognizes his talent. This second young man named Haiji brings the first young man, Kakeru, back to his dorm where he meets eight other young men through various stages of their college careers. Some are still young and enjoying the party scene. Some are looking for girlfriends. Some are looking for a career. But none of them are expecting what happens next, which is that Haiji tells them that the reason why their rent is so cheap at this dorm is because they were all tricked into joining the track team, and if they want to be able to stay in that dorm and keep paying really low rent, then they are going to have to start running and competing, with the ultimate goal being the Hakone Ikeden relay race, which is run in early January. So, yeah. Where to really start with this one? I'm curious to get your idea. I didn't ask you for your opinion about this before we started, but I know that you enjoyed it pretty well, didn't you?
I will describe it this way. Two of probably the most boring, mind-numbing activities I could think of. One is running, and one is, I don't know, let's say compiling a dictionary.
Okay.
Now, because the author wrote The Great Passage, which I loved, it was unfortunately behind the Amazon wall, so a lot of people didn't see it. And I had high hopes for Run with the Wind. when it came out, because I'm like, oh, great, it's an adaptation of the same author, another one of her novels, and basically I will now follow this author anywhere. Yes, I really enjoyed the show, even though there's not a speck of me that attaches to the concept of wanting to run.
Yeah, that's one thing that I can totally agree with. I remember when this show was first airing, there were people on Twitter and Discord saying, "Oh, I want to run now. This inspires me to run." And me watching this show, I was more than content to just watch them run and call that a workout.
It's workout for the brain, man.
Exactly. So yeah, this series didn't inspire me to, get off my ass and start working out or anything. I will say that I did actually watch the first 6 episodes of the series when it originally aired for another podcast, but when that podcast kind of faded away, so did my interest in watching the rest of the series until you recommended it to me.
Was there any particular reason why, or it was you were just kind of connecting it with the podcast, so maybe you were holding off in case you continued and then it was just too many weeks behind?
No, it was more just the show wasn't really grabbing me. I can actually, this is actually the first thing I have in my notes. The one big thing that I had about this series is that in the early going, it was a little difficult for me to suspend my disbelief that this ragtag team of non-athletes were actually going to be able to get their act together and run this grueling relay race.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of research into this. This is a race, for those of you who aren't aware, it covers over 200 kilometers over a period of 2 days. There are 5 sections on day 1 and 5 sections on day 2. And each section can last anywhere from a dozen to 20 kilometers. And it's run in early January, so it's freezing cold out. And so, yeah, and these guys are not athletes in the least. Other than Kakeru, none of them even know how to run properly. It takes quite a long time for anyone to even be convinced to train and take this seriously.
Well,
in particular, there was the character Prince, who's this scrawny, pale otaku who can barely put one foot in front of the other to walk quickly, let alone run. So yeah, so in the early going, it was kind of difficult for me to suspend my disbelief that they were actually going to get their act together.
And that of course is fairly common with sports series in general. You have, here's the person, this person is talented, or here's the person who has some raw ability but zero familiarity with the sport until they get dragged into it in high school and suddenly they're, bringing their team to the Koshien or whatever their target is. They succeed beyond their wildest dreams, kind of thing.
I can see that, because definitely that is a theme. Thinking back on other sports series that I've watched,
it's pretty damn common all the time. So
yeah,
I can certainly agree with that. And I think in this case, where other people probably complain about a show being too slow paced, something like that, I think this show being done over 2 cores, and you could argue that it didn't have enough material to properly cover 2 full core, I think that assisted it a lot, because much like just daily training, get up, run 5 kilometers, do the same thing before you go to sleep, keep doing this day after day after day, keep doing it the whole time, you get a kind of slow, monotonous thing. You learn a little bit about the characters as you go along, but largely you're just learning to see who starts appreciating the process. Some of them some of them, of course, are just young and athletic. The twins, Musa, they have not really raw talent in running so much as, they're skinny, athletic types of people, and running is not something that really takes a whole lot of skill. I'm sorry, runners, you can start yelling at me now, but comparatively to things, you're not learning hand-eye coordination, you're not picking up a tool and doing something you've never done before. People walk and run all of their lives. This, especially the Hakone Ekiden, they're endurance training. So really it's about learning, developing yourself in a way that you are accumulating both speed and endurance to be able to handle a 20 plus kilometers of running. So because it's played out over so much time, it doesn't feel as unearned as other things. You can still argue there's probably some unearned in here, especially if you consider Prince, but it doesn't stick out as prominently as it does in a lot of other series. Now, you watched it more recently than I did. Do you recall how long between episode 1 and episode 24 this reflected, or 23, I guess? How many months it was?
I believe it was about a year. I believe so, if I recall correctly. I believe the series takes place over a period of about a year.
Okay. And that's certainly another thing that helps. I do wish I had that, for sure over the top, off the top of my head, but I didn't see like a met in the, February 18th of this year. So.
Yeah, no, they never really clearly identified the date on screen. So it's kind of just, there was just situational based clues to give out when the date was. And yeah, I believe it takes place over the course of about a year.
Okay. You'd probably be looking and see what the weather was like in episode 1, and if it was, cold. They did have to go in, of course, to they had to develop as a track team, quote unquote, and compete to at meets to get qualifying times, and a lot of that was in the summer. So therefore, you sort of got these half-year intervals, and they would go to their extra training camps after that, and then it was just sort of advancing time to the Hakone Ekiden specific qualifier, and then to the Ekiden itself. So,
I mean, with all that said, I will say that I did really enjoy this series, and I'm glad that I finished it. There are some caveats to that. The main one being that if you don't like a series that foreshadows, you're going to hate this show, because this show foreshadows really heavily as it progresses on. Basically, maybe this is my experience talking, since I have seen more than a few sports series in my life, but as soon as I saw the scar on Haiji's knee early on in the series, I felt like I had a pretty good idea of how the series was going to end. And when I got to the final episode, I found myself to be mostly right. There were a couple of details that I didn't predict. But for the most part, yeah, I predicted how the series was going to end, just seeing that scar on his knee. And then there was the other moment that we got heavily foreshadowed, was when Kakeru's mean former teammate, whose name I don't remember off the top of my head.
Kosuke, I think.
Something like that. I believe so. But yeah,
you get redhead.
Yeah, the really annoying redhead. Yeah. Oh God, he was so annoying.
Sorry, redhead.
Yeah. Well, just
I did not like that boy. Of course, I didn't like Takeru's coach a lot more.
Oh,
we got to excuse some of Kosuke's personality through the lens of holy fuck, that coach, man, that high school coach. I often want to go into a show and murder one of the characters, and I definitely wanted to slam him upside a wall or two.
Yeah, definitely. When I was much younger than I am now, I actually did some sports growing up. When I was trying to find, my identity and who I was and everything, I went through a period where I thought sports was the right answer. Yeah, right. Anyways, but yeah, I remember I had coaches like that who just pushed you and pushed you and pushed you, and that was one of the reasons why I discovered that sports wasn't the right answer for me.
Right.
And it wasn't the path that I wanted to go on, so I gave up on sports. But yeah, I do remember having a coach or two like that who just pushed and pushed. And yeah, it was not
fun. But that, I think that was one of the things. And I know that there were a bunch of things that they could play for drama and play it in different ways. Haiji's scar, of course, was like, okay, at what point does this become the thing? Does it happen in this thing? Or are we going to have all of the build-up to get to the point wherein they are, as it were, going to, fail out because, his leg blows out at some point? But does that happen during the race? Is it something that causes tension that Kakeru has to make up for? Is it something that it's simply that he gives up the rest of his running career in this moment, which I don't know if that's what you thought going in. I was busy juggling all of the possibilities of how they would play it. So I wasn't necessarily surprised, but I did like the way that they went with it ultimately. Even if you could see it coming, there are a number of things you could see coming, and this one ends up being more pleasant in the end, because he sort of he gets to become the kind of coach that Kakeru's wasn't in this case, and then you have the team that gets to continue on from here, even though a whole bunch of the folks were graduating or third years. But you have an extremely strong core with Kakeru and Jotaro and Taro and Jiro and Musa. So, although actually he stopped, didn't he? He just went down. I'm trying to remember the end. We're jumping ahead a bit, of course, but
it's fine. It's not a huge deal if we take this out of order.
But the thing that I did not get and did not buy so much, because I couldn't understand it. Now, maybe it would be a culturally understood part, but when we got revealed about Kakeru's coach and what the conflict is between him and Kosuke, that the whole team was punished for a student lashing out. It wasn't an inter-student brawl. It was one student having a problem with the coach for essentially breaking another player asunder. Like, the coach was going too far. Whether or not they push it, they were going too far. It's still the coach's fault that, he was pushing one person too far and wasn't taking care of the guy who did punch him in the face. But then the conflict, of course, is that team is forbidden from competing for the rest of the thing. So he basically ruined their, for a lot of people, their senior year of stuff. And I'm like, why would you punish the team when it was simply one player for it? They weren't representing them. So it was during a practice at their own school. So the player would be punished. The coach or a sub-coach could be. But that part was hard for me to chew, because of course it's a major point of drama, but it's the kind of thing where I'm like, it seems a bit too forced for that to be it. I'm not buying that that was the right solution and that was the outcome of the coach being megalomaniacal and one of the students not taking it well. So
Yeah, well, I actually didn't have too much of a problem with that part. I didn't have, because this is just based on my understanding of years of, watching series and talking to people who have either lived in Japan or currently live in Japan or just reading blogs. But yeah, basically, from what I understand, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down, and it's very militaristic in that regard. If one person acts out, everyone gets punished. So
there's a difference between missing a meet or doing a thing or suffering a penalty and the entire team loses the entire season. The school just doesn't compete at all. First of all, like the coach also loses from that because his track record, literally in this case, is based there. There is one such a thing as punishing a team, and part of it would be, if he was going to remain on it, but of course he didn't. So not only was the student himself gone at that point, the coach was still punishing the rest of the team, even though the two people at fault were him and Kakeru and zero other people.
Yeah.
on the team. And then it's like, well, I'm going to punish the rest of them anyway. That way, no one else punches me in the face. I suppose the underclassmen have to know not to punch him in the face when he's being megalomaniacal, but I don't know. It still felt too harsh. We could understand Kosuke's anger, but I couldn't connect with that particular dramatic element and cause of conflict between the characters.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that, but like I said, I just didn't really see a particularly huge issue with that. It didn't click in my brain as it was too harsh. It just clicked in my brain as, okay, this is the way things are done.
Possibly also affected by watching it all in a row. I'm not sure how, quickly, how fast you were marathoning it. But when you're week to week and chatting about it with other people, it becomes like, okay, here's the end of an episode, and then we're all talking about it for a while.
Yeah, totally.
So it sticks in my brain more than, okay, so that's what happened, and then you move on immediately to the next episode and get to see Kakeru's fine, glowy butt.
Yes, indeed.
That is the ultimate lesson of this show, is if you run well, you have a great glowing ass. I think that's what you were supposed to get from it.
So I mean, other than that, I'm trying to, think if there were any other, major moments. I mean, when going back to the redheaded annoying one, who shall remain nameless because
I've kept calling him Kosuke, man.
Yeah, I know. But anyways, when he said that the team was going to be screwed if even one of them caught a cold, that also
right, of course.
That also clicked in my brain. And it's like, oh, well, that's going to happen. Sucks for them.
Yep.
Yeah, so that was another thing that kind of clicked in my brain as kind of heavy foreshadowing.
Yeah, well, we knew, that kind of thing going in, that it's like, okay, well, it's one of those teams where if anything happens to one person, they all go down with the ship. So therefore they can build dramatic elements out of many, many a situation. So Cold, of course, then became, obviously this will come up. And I forget how many episodes afterward, but yes, it did to, is that Shindo? I think it was Shindo that got...
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. He was one who had the girlfriend who broke up with him and because he was devoting too much time to racing, and then he caught the cold and his family cried as he fought through the elements and fought through his fever to run 20 kilometers to deliver the sash, which props to him, because there's no way I would have done that. I catch a cold and fever, I'm laying in bed for a weekend. Screw off.
Right.
So definitely props to him. That was definitely, if there was any part of this series that I would call inspiring, I would say that was it.
I think I was affected a bit more by Prince at the last track meet managing to qualify, because of course Prince is the kind of people who watch these shows. Prince is our audience cipher. It's like, oh look, we're probably not all as svelte as he is, but he's the lazy, manga reading otaku, and it's like, oh hey, I know him.
So overall, I wasn't displeased with this one. There were little bits here and there that kind of stuck out a little bit, but for the most part, I enjoyed this one, and I'm glad that I watched it.
Speaking of girlfriend, though, what did you think about Hana-chan?
Hana was just kind of there. She never really got a conclusive ending. It was hinted that she liked one of the guys, but they never really went into which one it was.
Yeah, I found it weird. First of all, I assumed immediately that she was stuck on Haiji because of the manner of introduction and her willingness to help him bring all of this out there. And of course, you have the twins, and they're both cute or whatever. But yeah, obviously they think Hana is cute as well, and you can assume that. But that was one of those things that I found a bit irritating when they were running the Ekiden, was like coming to realize, oh, I think she likes me. And I'm like, are you seriously trying to throw romantic distractionary drama between the twins in the middle of this for something that's had basically zero development? I'm like, oh.
Yeah, totally.
I thankfully it didn't mean anything.
That. And then, like I said, it goes nowhere.
Yep. You get no answers, even though they have an afterword. You don't get an answer to it.
Yeah,
I thought it would have been interesting in the end if she was just with like Musa at the end, and both of the twins were never actually part of it anyway.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I think that's the sole female presence in this whole show.
Yeah, pretty much.
So therefore, of course, the what is it? The main question here is who is best boy? Because that, of course, is the most important question. There's so many choices.
There are. I hadn't really thought about who I would choose as best boy.
You can cop out and say they're all best boy, because literally they pretty much all are. Certainly by the end. So some of them, like Yuki, is more surly throughout. But even what you get from King and Nico and others, it all ends up being just so heartwarming between the whole of them, and especially they're all as a team, and they have no one who's sticking out. They're all aspiring and inspiring each other. So you could say that Best Boy is, the Chikuseisou dorm mates. All of them, especially the dog.
Yeah, the dog was adorable. The dog had a better presence in the series than Hana did.
That is true.
Yeah. If I really had to narrow it down and choose a best boy, I'd probably go between either Nico or Prince. Prince mostly because I loved his t-shirts that he wore throughout the series.
Yeah, that's true.
I loved the t-shirts that he would just randomly be wearing, and the subtitle would pop up and I would laugh. it never failed. It always amused me.
He did have great ones. He had the best expressions. I mean, all of them had good expressions here and there, but Prince First and the Twins Second had these just gloriously, goofy things that would go on. So it was very fun to screen cap them an awful lot. But I liked the you had the contrast between Kosuke, the annoying redhead, but you also had Kazuma, the mostest runnery guy in the university at this point. The just tall, strong, ennobled. He's your noble foe kind of thing. The one that's like, okay, here is what I aspire to be, to beat, to at the very least to compete with. The embodiment of we are strong. The motto of amusingly the what is it? The Hakone cycling club from Yamushi Pedal. So he's just the strong-chinned, really good guy who gets to have, in a weird way, a one-off between Kakeru. They're not racing together. It's simply their times are measured against each other.
Yeah, that was a really fun moment. I really enjoyed that moment when Kakeru crosses the line and beats out the section record by a second.
Yep. That was also good because, of course, we followed Kakeru through the most, and he was the most emotional, and of course the in it for himself. He's the one who had to be converted. So we got to have a good long journey with him, which was good.
Yeah, that was really nice. Did you have any final thoughts or questions or anything that you wanted to bring up about this series?
I was going to ask you if you had watched any of Tsurune, which was playing in around the same neighborhood.
No, I've never actually gotten around to watching that.
Okay, because it's another boys' sports thing, so it's connected. But the enemy team had the most piece of shit twin brothers that I'd run across. I'm like, oh god, I hate these guys so much. I hated them more than the annoying redhead here. And of course, I go from that to Run with the Wind, who have the sweetest, most adorable goofball twin brothers. And I'm like, oh, okay. And both of them look like Hibito, so that doesn't hurt.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't even thought about how much they do look like Hibito, but yeah, they totally do. So, all right, let's go ahead. Let's move along.
Oh, hey, no.
Wait.
Before we leave.
Okay.
OP1 over OP2, ED1 over ED2. How do we rank? We got 2 openings and 2 endings. So I thought they were all solid.
I generally, when I was marathoning it, I didn't listen to the endings all that closely, but I did prefer the first OP over the second.
Okay. And both endings were good to end with, but I did like the ending 2 better. Possibly, I think it was a better ending, and possibly it also was simply that they were in the middle of doing more actual competing. So the way that you were resting from the week at that point, the ending was more fulfilling because you actually had an exciting thing rather than we continued running and doing things, and then we exercised, and then Haiji collapses in an episode and we're like, oh crap, it's the medical drama here.
Yeah.
Thankfully none of those went in a completely goofball direction, and it ends pleasantly enough, even if it's able to be predicted.
Yeah, totally.
I think so.
All right, are you ready to move on?
Well, we can. What if you were going to give it a score at this point, what would you stars or you know?
I believe I gave it around 3.5 to 4 stars, somewhere in that range.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a decent series. It was definitely good enough that if it got dubbed, I might watch it again.
Dubbed.
I know.
we won't start into that. But yeah, you didn't watch it with your wife or anything then.
No,
so this one was just you kind of going through it. Is it the kind of thing you would want to share with her or with others, dubbed or not? Or is it...
I don't know if I would go out of my way to recommend this one. If someone were into sports and were into like marathon running, I think that I might point them towards this one. But if it's just an average person who doesn't really do a whole lot of sports or anything, I probably wouldn't steer them towards this one.
Okay. Yeah, I think this works for anime of a certain type or sports of a certain type. Like if someone is really into Haikyuu, I'm not going to say, "Oh, you're into a sporting thing. Watch Run with the Wind."
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like your conventional one, even though the ultimate grounded elements of it kind of end up being the same. But it's obviously more adult, more slow paced, and almost like zero of anything you could count as action. There were no dramatic shots worth a damn. There were fun reaction shots, but I couldn't tell you any part of it that made me go, "Oh, here's the Sakuga moment of this show."
Yeah, totally.
The only thing I could react to were the anti-Sakuga moments where I saw them starting to fill in more scenes, like faraway details of the track meet with CG, and I'm like, God, no, stop CG. They just looked so goofy at that point when I could tell that they were robot replacement. But such is modern anime.
Did you have any other points that you wanted to bring up?
No, I think we covered the ground.
Okay, cool. Let's go ahead. Let's move along to your series. Your series is so the opposite direction of where I went for over this last month, but that's okay. So
you described it as a tearjerker, and so what I'm wondering is, did you think I was enough of a jerk to be worthy of the tears? So
I don't know, but go ahead and for those who haven't seen this series, go ahead and give a quick synopsis. What is this series about?
Quick synopsis. It seems to be fairly near future. I don't think they ever give a year, but it's the kind of thing where you would assume 1 to 2 generations from hence. So we're in the near future, and we are in a human society where there is an android presence a lot more. There's a particular corporation which has come up with androids who very much look and act like humans. They function much more closely to humans, though in a way that's never explained. It comes with a limitation, and that is that they all have a maximum lifespan before they degrade. In this case, 80,000 some odd hours, which is about 9 years and 3 or 4 months, something like that. So you have a human society, and you have a lot of androids who get to interact with people, and it's exploring why people have these giftias. They are known as the humanoid androids. What they are used for, what they help with, And then, of course, a lot of it has to do with how they are retired, because our main character is someone who is working for that corporation, Psi Corporation's terminal services, which, of course, since I field Windows terminal servers, it was always a little hard to wrap my brain around because they kept saying a Windows term when they would describe their job. But they work for a terminal services employer, and what that is they help retire Giftias who have reached the end of their lifespan, because the other negative of them starting to break down is that they can go actually psychotic. They start experience memory loss, and then they can go violent and uncontrollable to a certain degree. So part of it is just to be a part of the Android services, the purpose for the Giftias, but then the other part is to be a protective measure against the negative consequences of a Giftia going berserk. So we get to experience him starting a job, and then, meeting people. And because this is a pretty immediately evident it's going to be a romance anime, you also know it's going to be of the doomed romance anime sort, because, well, it will involve people with limited lifespans. So in a way, it's a spin on, the person has cancer, only a certain amount of time to live, so therefore what kind of a romance develops between the characters in that period of time. This is built in at a societal level, so it's, the hope, of course, is to explore a lot of functions of that. And I assume that's a good enough explanation of where to start. So where do we want to go?
So, all right. Let me see. I didn't really write down many questions on what I want to ask you about this one, but let's go.
I will. The thing that you brought up first the last time, I did watch it during the season. I had started watching it because it was mentioned enough. I got to episode 3, and I tried watching episode 3 a couple of times, and it was just so the kind of like harem rom-com farce that frustrates me to a degree. So I just gave up on the show before being able to finish episode 3. So it failed my 3-episode test, and that is why I ultimately dropped it. Not with enough distaste that I was unwilling to pick it up again at your suggestion, but I knew that reapproaching episode 3 might be a challenge.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, episode 3, you'll have to refresh my memory. I haven't rewatched this series in a little while. I remember a lot of details. I don't remember exactly which episode that was, though.
Episode 3 is the one where they're assigned to live together.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
He's being given instructions on how to because he moves into Isla's we didn't even mention character names. Our main character Tsukasa and our main female Giftia character Isla. He moves into where she has been dorming at the dorms that are attached to the business, essentially. And then, of course, he's finding out that she's basically ignoring him while he's there, so everyone is giving him hints on how to, attract her attention, to be a good roommate, and there's just a progressively more awful, every trope in the book, pratfalling, person walks in at exactly the wrong time, slapping him around like an idiot face. Everything goes wrong. It ends in a way that's not so, slapstick, but the progression of it just made me go, because I already know what I feel like it's supposed to be going to, and I'm like, I don't know how something that is engaging me in an episode like this will actually get there, because it seems to be very tonally fractured to have that level of harem rom-com farcitude along with the doomed romance between two lovers sort of thing. So
yeah, I mean, I can understand that. Episode 3 tonally was really one of those weird things where I think they inserted it just to make sure that it had some laughs in the early going to keep people interested, but they didn't really need it because the series was not going for that in the overall sense of the final destination. So yeah, so I can understand that maybe they inserted it just because they felt they needed to keep people drawn in. But like I said, they didn't really need to.
They didn't need to. I think they kept an awful lot of it throughout. 3 was the biggest, tropiest, most congealed form of that sort of thing. But the kind of humor that did interrupt here and there, and the goofy sort of harem rom-com farcitude still ended up in there. Reinforced an awful lot by the way that Michiru was acting, because she didn't help me, try to settle into it very seriously, because her character is literally like, take all of the traits that you understand a tsundere to have and then square it and purify it and put it through a filtration system and make her even more tsundere than can possibly tsundere. And literally that's the only thing you're going to get out of her. She has a backstory, which you get a little bit of, which is nice. Him and her and her father, her and Kazuki, but literally her personality is tsundere squared. And yeah, it always shows her stuck on Tsukasa, so you're like, okay, well, there's being thrust in here. How am I going to invest in a relationship between Tsukasa and Ayla when we know Ayla is doomed, but Michiru and Tsukasa will obviously get together right after anyway, because they're playing that out extremely frontally, not so prominently that it's kind of distracting to me trying to invest in the romance between Tsukasa and Ayla. And a little bit of that also comes out in the speed at which I was saying how the slow pace of Run with the Wind helped it, because it's literally about running, repetition. I don't know if they could have pulled it off, but I really did want more. Because if I'm trying to remember the timing. If I'm thinking about it, you have the episode right before 3 is when he learns that Ayla only has 2,000 hours left, or 2.5 months, something like that. So we know specifically just how doomed it is before anything has even happened with it. He seems to, be the immediate smitten type, but then again, he is literally your dopey cheese ball, undeserving harem anime boy protagonist guy, largely personalityless other than being a pushover. It's that kind of thing. So I'm like, okay, I have to invest in him. I know there'll be something between him and Ayla, and you get, glimpses and moments, but between the pratfall episode and literally the next job that they get, which is a big arc about actually working with a Giftia who goes over the edge. So we start learning more of the backstory, what's up with Kazuki, what's up between her and Isla, why Isla has been the way she has for the past 3 years. After that, I think we're only at the 1,000-hour mark. So it's like one job reflected half of her remaining lifespan. And I didn't get enough relationship development between the two of them, because we really quickly go in. Now I like that they don't do the surprise motherfucker kind of, I have 2 weeks left doomed level, and you learn that at the second to last episode. So that was good. It was approached early. I felt like it needed to be explored more, but more to the point, I felt like for me to invest in their becoming in love with each other, I needed to see more of it, and I needed to see less of it in the the goofy rom-com sort of way, because that's what it started in. Then we get the serious bits, but it's largely dealing with Sota and Marcia, the Giftia who goes over the edge. And then we learn some of the tragicness of everyone's backstories. But shortly after that, he will end up confessing to her. And I'm like, other than the fact that you probably have never gone out with anyone and fancied anyone before, and she's just your type, I don't detect why you are sincerely in love and why she would be with you, because I don't see enough of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for that. I'm still affected by it, but it's hard for me to invest in the I don't want to say realistic nature of it, but it's hard for me to invest in the potency of their declared feelings for each other, which is, of course, what everything about the ending hangs on, when I just didn't see the development of it.
So. I can understand that. I mean, for me, when I think back on this series, there are definitely moments that I remember that stick out more than anything. A lot of the finer details have faded from time. That's just how things go. But I mean, like with episode 1, when they introduced the world and they introduced the jobs, and they introduce how these Giftias interact with the world and what their functions are, that was able to pull me in pretty heavily. I remember very distinctly after that first episode going, okay, I'm invested in this world. So it was a lot easier for me to buy into the relationship. I think because that first episode just kind of suckered me in really well. For lack of a better phrase, I probably should have used a better word. But definitely after that first episode, I was pulled in a little bit more. I felt strongly attached to the characters, so I was able to buy into their relationship a little bit easier. I understand your issues with episode 3. Yeah, it was funny, but it wasn't really necessary. Like I said earlier, I think my biggest complaint about this series is that middle story arc, the one where they have to go after the Giftia that has gone berserk. I think that was my biggest complaint, mostly because what I felt like what it was setting up for was for Isla to actually go past her limit and go insane, and they would have to put her down. But they decided not to go in that direction, which kind of confused me, if I recall correctly.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have gotten that impression at all, mainly because, first of all, her character type and the drawn thing, and of course, if they're going to have a loving relationship with each other, has to be the kind of, loving let go. That it's easiest to make the comparison to people who have cancer and know that they have a limited time. It's never as exact. But in this case, you know your time is limited. You want to do the whole living life to the fullest sort of thing, even if in this case it's developing a relationship, being in love, and knowing you only have like less than a month left to it, or about a month by the time you have an actual relationship. And what does that mean? What do you do in that amount of time? I couldn't see that. What I did see from, the purpose of the Marcia storyline was more to develop the world a bit more. Like you said, you were pulled in from the concept. We have to see the consequence of that concept. What is the reason the terminal service employees exist? So what is the bad side of it? And that is reflected with that storyline. And more to the point, that's how we get Michiru's backstory, because that happened with her father. Kazuki is forced to kill her father, but then gets to bring her in to become an employee of the same terminal service. Kazuki is injured. That ends the relationship, the partnership between her and Isla. So there's a lot of stuff around the introduction of that ties with everyone else's own dramatic points, what brought them together, what keeps them together, what makes them kind of a family with each other. So I didn't at all think that it was going to turn into that would be the ultimate, fate of Isla in some form. It seemed to be just there to expand what we understand of the Giftia and bring in everyone else's backstory. And in this case, what happened with Isla after that point that made her start a certain way and develop as she became started to fall for Tsukasa at that point. And I do have issues with all of these elements as well, so we can get into that at some point. But I didn't make that particular connection, so that wasn't hanging over me. But there were other things that did as a consequence of that.
Okay, so I mean, getting into like the middle parts of the series, like I said, I'm recalling moments, but I'm not recalling a lot of great details.
So you only watched it as it was airing and not since?
I've watched it a couple of times since then.
Oh, okay.
It's just sure. It has been a few months. At least,
oh wow! Okay, I'm not sure if that says something about you or about the show, where it's been a few months since you've watched it multiple times and you can't recall moments from it. I'm like, wait a minute. Shouldn't it be fairly well reinforced after multiple viewings? One of which is not 4 years ago, but is months ago.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's been a while. It's been long enough since I've revisited it that I can't recall, vividly everything that happened within it. But like I said, I have watched it once or twice further since it originally aired 4 or 5 years ago. So definitely.
Middle section is kind of. I was just as a reminder, since I've obviously watched it. Middle section is where we get the return of a whole bunch of stuff having to do with the amusement park. They connect a lot of ways to that particular amusement park, which I found interesting. But hunting down some runaways with people from another section, and you meet a Giftia who has been wiped and rebooted. Olivia by the new characters, but Eru knew her as Andy previously. So it's been a few years since she was wiped and reused by the Terminal Services 3. And then you get to see the whole thing. Can memories come back? because I'm sure that's another thing that you or other people are likely to think is there a way to save her by the end? So in the middle, you get quite a bit of reinforcement of, we know of no way that this is just going to happen. And of course, then you get the confession, and then you get Isla's rejection and some of the the funniest Tsukasa, reaction shots were during all of that. I'm gonna have to pass you a bunch of screenshots, and you can let me know about that. She rejects his confession. You have an extremely romantic confession moment, and she's too flustered by it. And then the whole other episode is like watching him basically be detonated.
Okay, yeah, I remember this.
He's literally colorless for most of the episode. Yeah, I'm dropping them in the Hangouts window. So,
Yeah, I see him.
yeah. But then, of course, they have to have the dramatic break up and get back together sort of thing as Hazuki is trying to make, and Michiru both, but folks are trying to make Isla, decide that she can't refuse her feelings in order to preserve Tsukasa's. But, it's still the process of making these memories that is worth it in the end, both for her now, even though she's only got weeks left at this point, and for him, even though certain painful moments he will carry through, until his meat ends, as it were.
Yeah.
I'm very poetic. I call humans meat. And then, of course, you get the kind of the wind down for it, which is all of the actually having what kind of a relationship do they have with each other for the last 3 episodes. When they are with each other, they're officially boyfriend and girlfriend. Will they do the whole getting married right before the end thing? Will they? What kind of time do they spend in the little time that they have left, and how is that conveyed to us? So the major arcs, as it were, in it.
So, all right. So overall picture, what did you think of this show? It doesn't sound like you enjoyed it greatly, but I'm hoping that you enjoyed it at least a little bit.
Not greatly. It of course doesn't take any effort to make me emotional by stuff. This is a Doga Kobo show. The director, did other shows that I enjoy, New Game and Engage to the Unidentified. So I could certainly expect a lot out of the show in general, even though it's hard for me to. There are the multiple points of frustration that I mentioned, which is, first of all, trying to attach to their actual loving each other in this manner in this short a period of time. How seriously can I treat all of that considering the circumstances? A little bit of it, of course, is playing against the humor elements that are always throughout, but really just in general. But of course, Isla's design is, moe cancer of its own sort. So the people are, of course, all very endearing and cute, including Eru, who sexually assaults people, but she's a girl and has big boobs, so who would complain? She gets to dress Isla up in fun pajamas. It's worth it for everybody. The second element is where I'm going to roll back a little bit to your what is it? Your comment about being drawn into the world. And I agree, but for me, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because the world had an interesting concept, but I found it just didn't have answers. So what I mean by that is we have these Giftia who are extraordinarily human. I mean, they have elements. Isla is fairly locked off, but they have personalities all over the place. Zach is just like a jackass kid the whole time. Constance is best boy. Sherry is a serious office worker. You see Gifty of all age ranges, kind of. Well, yeah, I guess you never really see like an old Giftia, but we're not really given a good idea as to the purposes they're employed. Sometimes it seems to be, well, this grandmother lost her children and grandchildren in a horrific accident, and so she has a Giftia designed to look like her granddaughter, which, of course, that, would be effective therapy in a way. You have someone who can ease pain in such a way. So some people are just like, what is it? Marcia was just like a nanny for Sota, and Sota lost his parents, so he attaches more to her, and you get that back and forth. But even without it, she just would have been with the family until it was her time to be terminated. We're not seeing really what the purpose is. We're not seeing examples of androids that aren't Giftia in the society, because there are surely lower levels of them. So how does society incorporate androids in general, and what specific purpose are the Giftia serving? There's a lot of potential philosophizing in here, and societal exploration and ethical exploration and other stuff. It strikes enough of my hard sci-fi sensors, and I'm like, oh, there's some interesting territory in here. But due to the nature of the show and the humor elements of the show, and that it's really just supposed to be about the doomed romance between the two of them, structurally it's not much different than the dream girl who has cancer sort of thing. But we're in a future society. I don't feel like I have a grasp of how people treat androids in general, Giftia in general, and I found it a little bit creepy in the end. I know it was supposed to be meaningful, but when they're Tsukasa is supposed to sign the termination contract for Isla at the end. He's not her owner. She's been an employee of the branch for 10 years. She is a conscious entity. The owner-Giftia dynamic, due to the way they're presented, which is 100% human, but with some funny bits, like her saying error a lot, which admittedly is very cute. But I don't see a difference between Constance and a human who would be that. I don't see a difference between Zach and, just a jackass 12-year-old kid. There's obviously more to them depending on what they're doing, but because of that, these are sentient entities, but we're given the society in which they are treated as property. We're in fact told that the other terminal service branches don't give a crap, but I'm like, wait, you're literally not even employing basic funeral services for things that live for 10 years as a human. So it affected me in other ways because it intrigued me to a point, but then I didn't get the philosophical or conceptual meat that I wanted out of it, because it was kind of a rom-com drama.
Uh-huh.
So I felt split in a number of ways. There was definitely potential, and they could have delivered a lot more, I think, through it, but I didn't get what my brain wanted out of it. So it's a little bit muddled in there because I couldn't dedicate as much attention to the romance for various ways. I couldn't dedicate enough, to the society because it didn't give me enough. It gave me an interesting concept, but not enough delivery, not enough purpose by the end. So I don't know how to treat it, especially because it's only, right after I watched it. It's the kind of thing that maybe my brain at some point will say, yeah, okay, I didn't get this, I don't care. Now I'll just focus on the other portion of it and enjoy what I enjoyed out of it, which in a lot of ways was the humor. A little bit more than the drama. But so yeah, I'm a little confused by it. I certainly, I imagine, do not appreciate it as much as you do. I did enjoy it. I did get appropriate feelings out of it, but the aftertaste is unfulfilling for the various things that they were pushing through the show. So it's probably not one that I would share, but it's definitely one that I would mention when people talk about a certain type of show. It gets brought up all the time, when people are describing various shows and looking for others of the type. I know a lot of other people will enjoy it. I'm pretty sure fewer people will engage their sci-fi brain to the level that I did. So I have still recommended it even outside of watching it. But I'm unlikely to try to actively share it with the people that I share shows with. So, in the end, I have a bunch of funny screenshots from it.
Well, then at least it's not a total loss.
No. The more cute screenshots of a show, the better.
So, all right. Did you have any other final thoughts or comments that we haven't brought up yet about the show, or?
I'm not sure. The OP and ED were fine, but
I actually really like the OP. I have it on my iPod somewhere, I believe.
I feel like it's definitely those kind of things where it has to be. It's the kind of thing that is reinforced by your emotional attachment to the show. So if you are emotionally attached to the show and the characters and the process, then obviously what you're getting out of the OP leans a lot more into that. But they were definitely nice. They will not be on my iPod. I did find it funny, kind of with both series. There really weren't too many characters, voice actors who I attach to. I'm usually able to pluck out a bunch of the more popular ones. The only one I really recognized was Yasutaka had that guy's voice. The Kenshiro Tsuda, his particular voice is very recognizable, but almost no one else were parts that I recognized. I did do a little bit of lookup, and Isla was Sora Amamiya, who voices parts I would never have attached, like Akame from Akame Got Kill, and Aqua, who I guess in some ditzy moments there might be a bit, but I wouldn't have attached Isla to that. But the hilarious one that I found was Michiru, who is, of course, our long-haired, redhead Hyper Tsundere, is voiced by the same voice actress who does Chinatsu from Welcome to the Ballroom, who is, of course, our long-haired, red-headed Hyper Tsundere. So I'm like, okay, that I can completely see. I'm surprised I didn't notice it going in. But, so yeah, that was the amusing bits to go out with.
So in that case, let's go ahead. Let's wrap things up for this episode. Thank you very much for doing this with me and having a good time and being willing to go back and watch something that I recommend to you. We haven't decided on what we're going to record next month, but we will definitely keep you all informed as a decision is made. Until then, thank you very much again, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks for coming, folks.